Right on time. A good crew. We need to put people in the front row, you know? Good morning. Let me break into this moment of silence and say hello. Good to see you. My name is Tony Fisher. I serve this congregation as minister, gratefully and proudly. A wonderful group of people, and I'm just so happy to welcome you on Sunday morning. People keep asking me how I'm doing, and I'm doing just the same as you. This morning, we have a treat. I'm especially grateful to introduce and welcome as our guest, Askar Selimjanov, whose appearance today is sponsored by John Pipkin and Sam Black. Askar is an incredible violinist who's a multiple winner of the Lyric Chamber Music Competition, winner of the first NSAL Piano and Strings Duo Competition, and the fourth annual John Oliveira String Competition. He is also laureate of the 6th International Competition of Young Performers in Moscow, a finalist in the 2nd Yankelevich International Violin Competition, and laureate of Vladimir Spikonov's South Florida International Music Festival. Excuse me, I'm reading too fast. Excuse me. Askar has performed as soloist with the South Florida Symphony Orchestra, Orchestra Miami, Uzbekistan National Symphony Orchestra, State Conservatory Orchestra of Uzbekistan, and the Lynn Philharmonia under the batons of, I'm not going to do that. Askar has also performed as a chamber musician internationally here in the United States, across Europe, and in Asia. We are extremely grateful for your presence this morning. Welcome. So briefly, we have another great forum after the service today with Representative Anna Eskamani, a representative from the Orlando area in the Florida State Legislature, a wonderful speaker, great leader, so please stay for that. This afternoon, we have a pavilion concert with the Brandon Robertson Quartet, and trio.
An amazing drummer. And all three, it's sort of an all-star trio. Each one of them, whenever they play, depending on who gets the gig, that's the name of the trio. So, meaning they play everywhere, and they're all headliners. They're an incredible group. So I hope you can come.
That's this afternoon at 4 o'clock, right here in the sanctuary. Wednesday, another Progressive Voices lecture, this time with Neil Volz, who directs the Florida Rights Restoration Project, another great speaker and a wonderful activist on behalf of former felons who are looking to restore their ability to be full-time citizens of our state. Okay, you ready? And I am also grateful that Joanne Husky is here with me as worship associate and to continue and complete this welcome.
Well, thank you, Tony. I'll add my welcome to that of Tony's, to old and new friends here this morning, that we are all here together and gathering in community. We're especially thankful if you've come today, maybe the first or second or third time. I hope that you'll find a way to connect and get involved and find support in this vibrant community. Please make yourself known to us so we can welcome you. If you're new, or even if you're not new, the statement on the back of our order of service you all have are lists the things that we hold in commitment here that are important to us. Our goal as individuals and as community here is to take those affirmations that are listed there and to live them out in the wider community. And that's a commitment that we make by being Unitarians, Universalists. So now let's take a moment and take a deep breath and relax and settle in as we listen to our morning prelude.
We begin each day not knowing what it will bring. The steady routine or a surprising new twist. Some news that brings great sorrow or an unexpected joy. A disconcerting thought or a flash of insight. The wish to retreat in pain or the delight in taking a bold new step. Each day offers up the possibility of something new. How we respond depends on how well we ourselves feel loved and supported. This is the reason for our coming together, the reason for community, to welcome one another, to hold each other in loving kindness, and to continue to do that for as long as we are able. Let's join together in the chalice lighting response. You'll see on the screen and in your order of service. In the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment, we gather this day. May the flame we now kindle be to us a symbol of the unity we seek. And let's rise together in body or spirit and join in singing our opening hymn, number 346, in the gray hymnal, Come, Sing a Song with Me.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love in a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
The world feels like it is reeling out of control with the many crises that we are facing simultaneously. Who, we all ask, can lead us out of this crisis? What kind of leaders do we need when crisis really hits? We have seen a very disturbing rise in autocracy, and the world is looking very scary. There seems to be too much testosterone running around the world. People globally are struggling economically, socially, and emotionally. We are suffering from disease and war and vast anxiety on a global scale. On top of all this, racial animosity continues to bubble beneath the surface. The world really seems to lack the very values that women embody: compassion, cooperativeness, empathy, equity, and generosity. Historically, women, because they bear the children, have cared not only about their families, but about their community and often about their nation. It's not an accident, really, that women have traditionally been in jobs that address the health, environment, human and civil rights, and education of all of us in our communities. That holistic, humanitarian approach to problem solving is so desperately needed today, not only in our religious organizations, but across every venue of our society right now. So as we look forward to International Women's Day this coming Saturday, let us look at the women who have guided us through times like these of racial, health, and economic anguish. Many of the greatest success stories have stemmed from women leaders who have fought for our civil rights and who continue to carry on and inspire us to carry on today. Notable women like Sojourner Truth, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, Harriet Tubman, Ida B. Wells, Margaret Sanger, Alice Paul, Eleanor Roosevelt, Frances Perkins, Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamer, Shirley Chisholm, Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, Dolores Huerta, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Michelle Obama, Jennifer Lawrence, and so many other women, some of them recognized and some of them not. Also, let's think right now of the major women's rights and advocacy groups in the United States that today, right this moment, are challenging the abuses that we are all witnessing every minute to our civil rights, and they are standing up. Organizations such as Moms Demand Action for Sensible Gun Legislation in America, the League of Women Voters, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Me Too movement, the National Organization of Women, Lean In, the National Women's Law Center, Emily's List, Planned Parenthood, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Human Rights Campaign, the women's division of that, the Women's Sports Foundation, the Representation Project, the Black Women's Equal Pay Coalition, the National Domestic Workers Alliance, Sister Song, the Center for Reproductive Rights, Reproductive Freedom for All, or NARAL, Black Mamas Matter Alliance, and so many others. These women-led organizations, along with many other grassroots organizations, are making a significant impact on all of our civil rights right this minute, and they will continue to do so in the foreseeable future, so don't lose hope. Women are 51% of our population, and it is shameful that half of our country had to fight for a voice and a place at the table. But today, right this minute, we again have a role to play in protecting what we have gained and holding on to our civil rights. All women, together with our men, are urgently needed to work to right the wrongs that are happening all around us. The time is now.
International Women's Day falls right at the beginning of the Women's History Month, and I want to share with you this morning, and I'm honored to share with you I'll give you an introduction to some of the Unitarian and Universalist women of the 18th and 19th and 20th centuries who have had an impact not only within our combined Unitarian and Universalist traditions, but throughout the span of our nation's history as well. Abigail Adams, Unitarian wife of the second President of the United States. Though not exactly the feminist that some historians have depicted her as being, Adams was concerned with the greater protection of women under new laws as well as access for women to formal education. In a letter to her husband at the Constitutional Convention, she wrote the famous line, "Remember the ladies. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could." And next to her is Judith Sargent Murray, who was an early advocate for women's rights, an essay writer, playwright, poet, and letter writer. In the 1770s, she penned the essay on the equality of the sexes, which paved the way for other feminist writers in later years. Her ideals were supported by her husband, John Murray, founder of the Universalist Church of America. Adams and Murray worked together to expand educational opportunities for women in the Boston area. Dorothea Dix. Dorothea Dix was an early 19th century activist who drastically changed the medical field during her lifetime. Her work in support of better care for the mentally ill culminated in the restructuring of many hospitals, both in the United States and abroad. And additionally, Dix helped recruit nurses for the Union Army during the Civil War, and as a result, transformed the field of nursing in her own time. And Margaret Fuller, author, editor, critic, teacher, feminist, and revolutionary, who played a key role in the Transcendentalist movement, perhaps best known for writing the first American manifesto for women's equality, Women of the 19th Century, published in 1845. She served as a war correspondent and wrote about poor conditions in prisons and mental hospitals for the New York Tribune. Lucy Stone was a noted Unitarian feminist and abolitionist, known as the first woman to keep her own name after marriage. And Julia Ward Howe should be a familiar name to you. Author, poet, abolitionist, peace activist, famous for writing the Battle Hymn of the Republic and the Mother's Day Proclamation, which we have read here in this space. She was unsuccessful in her attempts to promote an International Women's Peace Congress, but successful in so many other ways. Mary Livermore, temperance and suffragette leader, popular lecturer, editor, and writer, she wrote about her experience working as a nurse during the Civil War and lifted up the contributions of other women of the period. And Susan B. Anthony, born a Quaker, became a Unitarian. She was the most famous public voice of the early women's rights movement and was arrested for casting a vote in the 1872 presidential election. Louisa May Alcott, a Unitarian best known as the writer of Little Women, she too was associated with the Transcendentalists and served as a nurse during the Civil War. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, a prolific writer, lecturer, and reformer, she wrote many books of poetry with strong anti-slavery themes, as well as a novel about African American life during Reconstruction. A member of the Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, Watkins once refused to give up her seat on a streetcar. When the conductor refused to take her money at the end of her ride, she threw it on the floor and left. Undoubtedly a courageous and powerful voice for justice. Fanny Barrier Williams, who we spoke about just a couple of weeks ago, Unitarian, passionate about working for the rights of African American women and one of the first leaders to identify housing segregation and limited employment opportunities as critical issues for racial justice. She was the only black woman to speak at the 1893 World Parliament of Religions and was one of the co-founders of the NAACP. Olympia Brown, ordained in 1863, Brown was one of the first women ministers whose ordination was recognized by any religious denomination, the Universalists. This is Mary Augusta Safford and Eleanor Gordon, who I'll speak a little about later, ministers in the late 1800s in what was known as the frontier, in the Midwest at that time. Sophia Lyons Paz revolutionized the way traditional religious education was taught, making complex theological concepts and history more acceptable and exciting a younger audience through storytelling, painting, and other forms of creativity and self-expression. And Cecilia Payne Gaposchkin, the first woman to receive tenure and the first chair of a department in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Harvard University. An astronomer, she discovered that hydrogen is 1,000,000 times more abundant than any other element in the universe. And along with many more scientific breakthroughs, she also taught Sunday school at the congregation where I grew up, First Parish in Lexington, Massachusetts. During a time when the sciences were even more dominated by men than they are today, her persistence and brilliance made incredible strides for women in the field. Through their caring, perseverance, their intelligence, and their compassion, these women and so many more have had a significant impact on our liberal religious tradition and how we have continued to evolve. Again, so many more that are worthy of our mention, but for lack of time, we can't. I urge you to do your own research and find out the incredible wealth of intelligence and compassion and talent that have served our Unitarian and Universalist denominations for so many years. And now, let's remain seated and join in our centering hymn, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. We'll sing verses 1 and 2. The words will be on your screen.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. Then our heart is in a holy place.
Time of sharing, a time when we have the opportunity to share with this loving community something that is important to any one of us, a joy or a sorrow that we're feeling, not a time for social comment, but a time for recognizing that each of us experiences the ups and downs of this life, and that those joys and sorrows are always woven fine. If you have a joy that you'd like to share or a sorrow, raise your hand. I'll bring you the microphone. Tell us your name and briefly what's in your heart.
I am personally sorrowful and ashamed. The husbands who are still fighting. It produces deep sorrow in me.
We do acknowledge that though no one raised their hand, that each of us feels so much sorrow at what's going on in the world today, what's going on across our nation. We share the struggle of understanding, the depression of not knowing what we can do and feeling a little helpless. And though we've started to respond and build something of a resistance, we're still in that place where we are struggling and finding it difficult. I am grateful for all those things, all those folks who asked me how I was doing when they walked in this morning, and I often responded pretty much the same as you. So we recognize that we are all both in a moment and also capable of pulling ourselves out of that moment. And we'll be talking a bit about that. Again, I saw a hand in the back, Kath. Let me.
I don't know.
There we go.
Oh, is it on?
Yep, it's on now.
I don't know how appropriate this is, but there is going to be a peaceful gathering on Saturday, the 8th, from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock at the county courthouse. So I welcome you all to join me. And
Thank you. In honoring women in religion and Unitarian Universalist women today, we also need to honor that a number of our rituals that we do have in our services, chalice lighting, these joys and sorrows were brought to us by women leads in our congregation, and not through any other fashion, but finding ways to express something of our needs and our joys.
Mine is gratitude. I want to, in this environment, say thank you to Ukraine. And it is, for us, I think, important to recognize that the role that they're playing in protecting all of Europe and us, and the cost of human life to that country and young people that are dying. And it is important when there is such a horrific calling for Ukraine to say thank you to us, that it is in our responsibility to say thank you to them.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Marcia Gunther, and it's been almost a year since I had my first surgery for breast cancer, and I'm doing fantastic. And I want to remind all the women on this day to get their mammograms.
Hi, I'm Beth, and I have a joy this week. And yesterday was my son's 12th birthday, and tomorrow is my daughter's 9th birthday. And next weekend, we're going to be spending some time in the Everglades on a glamping trip. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about our environment and getting that time to disconnect from technology and all that life that is bringing us right now.
Thanks, Beth.
My name is Bob Stanley, and I have a joy. On my birthday in January, our 5th great-grandchild was born, and she'll be visiting us on Thursday.
Awesome. Let's join together in the spirit of meditation. Spirit of love and life, God of our deepest understanding. When we watch the news and struggle to understand what we see, when we see disaster unfolding across the world, in Ukraine and Gaza, when we feel the paralyzing shock of a world gone awry, our hearts break open and spill out into our hands. And here we are watching what we love seem to slip away. When the unimaginable happens, the ache we feel is the ache of love's despairing truth. This is the love that no one chooses, the loss so out of order, so profound, love we don't even want to know, and yet the source of this despair, the reason for our hearts cleave and flow, is because they know this love and its fullness. This is the love of truth and beauty. Love that spans the web of being, uniting each of us within its timeless form. When we hear the news, when we watch our screens, when we struggle to understand, our hearts break open, spill into our hands, and there we stare at love lamenting. What am I to do with this? And with these raw and tender yearnings, we will, beat after precious beat, seek wholeness again. We need time to find our balance, to grieve, if we will make the room. Yet this is the right thing, this ache within our deepest beings. Know that these are normal, to feel disrupted, empty, or undone. Our hearts break open, and the love that is still true draws us once again together, story by story, step by step, into places tender, knowing, places of restoration, where we can mend, piece by broken piece. This is the love that runs between us, sustaining force of restoration, the love that nourishes and feeds us, binds us each to our collective core. We grieve, we weep, and sing. And through the anguish, but not despite it, love will repair us. Not the same, but stronger in some places, honoring the truth like a treasure, living out our lives' potential in the shadow of trespass, in the warmth of one another, in the light of what restored we will become. Let's share some time in silence.
Thank you. That was just magnificent. Really beautiful. Today's reading is Coming Home to Our Women's Identity by Lucille Shuck Longview. This was written actually in 1980, but it's relevant today. As our ears become attuned to hearing our inner voices and the voices of one another, so also do we hear the call of our sisters from far beyond. What spirals in also spirals out and beyond space and time. Thus, we hear the anguished words and the more anguished silences of women around the world and throughout time. We know that our sisterhood extends beyond our land and that we must reach beyond flags and nationalism, beyond languages and cultures, beyond institutions, beyond religions, to our sisters living hand to hand, eye to eye, thought to thought, with our compassion for one another and our love for this earth and our very love of life itself, creating bonds between all of us. We cannot fall back to the false assumptions of the faiths of the past, to the biased assumptions that have failed us and failed our half, the female half of the world. We can no longer embrace the patriarchal assumptions underlying traditional faiths. We must lift up our culture, women's significant strengths, insights, and understandings, our ways of coping and thinking. We must enter now and shape our world toward one of compassion and a new justice that dares to see and to feel and to respond toward human concern for and affirmation of life, towards joyfulness and celebration, towards relationships of love, respect, and mutual concern, toward cooperation, connectedness, and responsiveness. No vision, no worldview has the ability to sustain a just and caring society without a feminist perspective. A perspective that seeks the empowerment of women as well as men. In our own way of understanding life, we have new meaning. Thank you.
This service, though planned some time ago, seems to arrive at the appropriate time as we watch what's going on in Washington with the leaders of our nation acting so poorly. I offer 3 vignettes from what has been a long story of love and perseverance, of continually pushing through resistance to help create and continue to create a more open, compassionate, liberal, and liberating faith. During the last quarter of the 19th century, a group of extraordinary women claimed their role as ordained Unitarian ministers. They served churches throughout the Great Plains, where life was hard and there was little glory to be earned by bringing liberal religion to the settlers of the area. It was also an area where few men graduating from the Eastern seminaries were interested in serving. But this also made it an area beyond the full control of the Eastern hierarchy of our tradition. It was a place where women were accepted for their willingness to step in and serve, for their tenacity in the face of hardship, and for their personal and therefore more meaningful ministry. They called themselves the Iowa Sisterhood, and 2 women emerged as their leaders. Mary Augusta Safford was a natural preacher. Even before the age of 10, she'd be entertaining her family by standing on a tree stump and preaching the good news. No one thought that a woman could be a minister at that time, growing up alongside the Mississippi River in 1850s. But Mary had a dream that she kept, and by the time she was 28 in 1879, she was a fully ordained minister. And her childhood friend, Eleanor Gordon, followed her into ministry, and together they grew and planted churches throughout the Midwest. From the margins, these women pushed the boundaries, not only of the Unitarian movement, but also its concept of ministry. Though no less rigorous, theirs was a fresh and inquiring spirit that broke from the stuffy elitism and intellectualism that characterized many Unitarian pulpits back east. And in general, the sisterhood held that our common endeavor was to continually search those deeper and spiritual truths within ourselves, from which we build a foundation of values, all the while reveling in the freedom that allows for the consideration and incorporation of new ideas and understandings. Paired with that was the sense of responsibility to act on what we learn about ourselves and about the world, finding ways to make it a better place and to support one another on the journey. Unwilling to let their congregations settle into a staid church life of Sunday worship and reading groups, these ministers urged an integration of the spiritual life with current affairs and community service. Far from creating separation of minister and flock, they took seriously the tending of their church families, of teaching and nurturing the children and supporting their parents, not only through words of care and concern, but by rolling up their sleeves and helping out when needed. It was a significant shift in the practice of ministry. And while it came under criticism from the male establishment, ultimately these women influenced the role of clergy in our wider movement. The path to ministry was never easy for any of these women who were inspired to serve. It required determination to work twice as hard as their male counterparts and to outlast reluctant denominational decision makers. Despite their successes and the influence they had on the larger movement from their position on the margins, the able and dynamic clergywomen of the frontier came up against a fresh wave of resistance around the turn of the century when new leadership took over the American Unitarian Association. Women ministers and those that aspired to ministry fought what was to be a losing battle against the misogyny of a few short-sighted individuals and the silence of the larger church. After 1900, very few women were allowed on the path to ordained ministry. And while women continued to play important roles within congregations, the number of women ministers, never very high, dramatically declined. In the last quarter of the 20th century, another group of women began to have an impact on the by then combined Unitarian and Universalist traditions. From the cultural changes of the 1960s emerged a variety of feminist perspectives that called for continual attention to creating change and building a more equal and just society. Writers like Betty Friedan and Mary Daly, activist politicians like Shirley Chisholm and others inspired lay Unitarian Universalist women to question the smug sense within our tradition that equality existed between the sexes. They didn't need to look particularly hard for evidence, given the vast preponderance of males in the pulpits of our congregations and in the administration of our association. Women like Carol Brody, Rosemary Matson, Denise Tracy, Jean Zorhai, Denise Davidoff, and Lucille Shuck Longview, none of whose names are very well known to us today, began to articulate the idea that tent words such as men and human and person and the patriarchal isms, including Unitarianism and Universalism, while claiming to stand for all, did not truly cover half the membership of our two denominations, namely women. The closer one looked, the clearer it became that while claiming that we were democratic, the UUA practiced discrimination. Even before Lucille Shuck Longview got involved, women had tried the use of the denomination's resolution process to effect some change. 3 resolutions passed by the laity at the denomination's General Assembly in the 60s and early 70s had focused on promoting women in the pulpit and for equal employment opportunities, urging the association and the congregations to be more intentional about this. But denominational response was very slow. And while there was a growing understanding that resolutions were mighty frail tools to effect change, it seemed the only path open, and so 1975, Lucille Shuck Longview took it upon herself to draft a resolution that asked all Unitarian Universalists to examine carefully their own religious beliefs and reconsider teachings that perpetuate attitudes that cause women everywhere to be overlooked and undervalued. She gathered a small group of activists from within her own congregation and from local women she had met through the Unitarian Universalist Women's Federation, and they helped fine-tune a draft which was ultimately the Women and Religion Resolution passed unanimously by the General Assembly in 1977. Fortunately, at that time, feminist groups were increasing within the UU world and their districts. Women and religion became a movement that spread quickly across the country, and following the success of the resolution and some newly found support at the association level, women went to work strategizing on how they might deconstruct the sexism within our association and within our worship. Lucille Shuck Longview was at the fore of this effort as well. And soon after the resolution was passed, Lucille and a number of other leaders gathered for a session titled Moving from Words to Action. One of the main questions asked was whether the denomination's principles at that time were reflective of the newly expressed intent to affirm women as it affirmed men and to respect the totality of life on earth. And the resounding answer was no. And so a revision process led to the 1985 Principles and Purposes, our 7 principles and 6 sources, which we have known for a long time. And one of the most important pieces of those principles was the added 7th, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And one of the most visible changes spawned by the women and religion movement has been the rapid increase of women ministers within our tradition, from about 5% in 1977 to almost 60% today. And that has been coupled with increases in female leadership, within our association. Along with more women in the pulpit, feminist theology and spirituality continue to reshape the tone of Unitarian Universalist worship and lifespan religious education. It's not that patriarchy has completely disappeared from Unitarian Universalism, but there have been strong, capable, and compassionate women, lay and clergy alike, who have, since that time, made sure that we are continuing on the right path. It took until 2017 for a woman to assume the role of president of our association. But today we enjoy the leadership of Reverend Sophia Betancourt, our second elected female president following the tenure of Reverend Susan Frederick Gray. Their work, their collaborative efforts have been supported by women like Paula Cole-Jones, who spearheaded the drive for the eighth principle, calling on our movement to live into its values, into anti-racism and anti-oppression work. And the Reverend Cheryl M. Walker. Both of these women served on the successful Article II Study Commission, which, among so much else, incorporated the eighth principle into our new Article II language, our values-based language, bringing forth the values of justice and equity and generosity and interdependence. This document now speaks firmly to all people, all members of our tradition. They're supported by women like Rosemary Bray McNatt, who now heads up Starr King School for the Ministry in San Francisco. And Leslie Takahashi, who navigated our Unitarian Universalist Commission on Change, which worked to really enforce institutional change from 2017 to 2022. Like Mary Stafford and Eleanor Gordon, like Lucille Shuck Longview and Mary Matson, these women were initially attracted to this liberal tradition because of the values it espoused, of recognizing the humanity in all people, of creating a haven here on earth built on compassion and good works, and of offering free and responsible search for truth and meaning unencumbered by creeds that strained human reason. And when they have run up against realities that didn't jibe with the transformative message of the faith, they have poked and pushed and prodded from the outside of the established power structures and then from within to keep this a dynamic movement and not something stuck in the past or in outdated practices. As a liberal religious tradition, if we weren't there before, we occupy now a space clearly outside the structures of power within our nation. Let me repeat that. As a liberal religious tradition, if we weren't there before, we now occupy a space clearly outside the structures of power within our nation. And it behooves us to learn from the steadfast determination, the perseverance, the courage, the intelligence, and love that has motivated the women of our movement from its very beginnings. May we follow their lead.
I'm so proud to be a Unitarian after realizing that women were ordained in 1878 and that we can have this kind of a conversation right here today when so much effort is being made to put down any discussion of gender, let alone race. we can have this kind of a service and we can really discuss the issues. So the offering that we take every Sunday is an opportunity to recommit to this place and to all that it represents to all of us here. It is as much a part of our service as lighting the chalice or the beautiful music that we have. It is a reminder of a form of love which we call generosity. So your financial contributions and support for our mission and for both a haven in times of trouble and a beacon of hope for a world in need. For those online, your contribution could be sent to the address on the slide, and we gratefully receive the gifts this morning.
Wow. Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Abby. Dan, we're going to close the service with these final thoughts, okay? And these thoughts come to us from the Reverend Dr. Rebecca Ann Parker, formerly the head of Starr King School for the Divinity. She was a minister, an educator, a theologian, someone I admire greatly. She writes, "Your gifts, whatever you discover them to be, can be used to bless or curse the world. The mind's power, the strength of the hands, the reaches of the heart, the gift of speaking, listening, imagining, seeing, waiting. Any of these can serve to feed the hungry, bind up wounds, welcome the stranger, praise what is sacred, do the work of justice, or offer love. Any of these can also draw down the prison door, hoard bread, abandon the poor, obscure what is holy, comply with injustice, or withhold love. You must answer this question: what will you do with your gifts? Choose to bless the world. The choice to bless the world is more than an act of will, a moving forward into the world with the intention to do good. It is an act of recognition, a confession of surprise, a grateful acknowledgement that in the midst of a broken world, unspeakable beauty, grace, and mystery abide. There is an embrace of kindness that encompasses all life, even yours. And while there is injustice, anesthetization, and evil, there moves a holy disturbance, a benevolent rage, a revolutionary love, protesting, urging, insisting that that which is sacred will not be defiled. Those who bless the world live their life as a gesture of thanks for this beauty and this rage. The choice to bless the world can take you into solitude, to search for the sources of power and grace, native wisdom, healing, and liberation. More, the choice will draw you into community, the endeavor shared, the heritage passed on, the companionship of struggle, the importance of keeping faith, the life of ritual and praise, the comfort of human friendship, the company of earth, the chorus of life welcoming you. None of us alone can save the world. Together, that is another possibility waiting. Go in peace. Go in love. Have a wonderful day.